Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Pianist Academy. Good to see you today, this morning. It's 10 o'clock here in Colorado. Welcome to a Q&A session. I see we have a couple people here already. So if you have joined in and you want to say hi, please drop your name in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Maybe we have some friends here, and maybe we have some new viewers, new people with questions. Both are great. So while we kind of get going today, I'll just have a couple, I guess, announcements. I don't know. Couple announcements. I'm really excited about this. Today is actually the last day I have my piano access to my piano. And that doesn't sound like something to be excited about. But tomorrow, I am starting the whole process of getting new hammers for the piano. So there's a lot of stuff happening on it tomorrow. All the strings for the top, like 3 octaves, they're coming off. We're going to get new strings and a whole bunch of other new stuff in there. So I'm thinking we got Jose here. Awesome. New York City. Awesome. Thanks, Jose. You've got a lot of work happening on your piano too, it sounds like. Jose, what kind of piano do you have? You probably have told us before, but remind us. And we have Bunny Hollow here. And Becky. Yes. Awesome. Well, great. And a couple Sir Wolseley. Sir Wolseley, thanks. Yes. So that's an original of mine that I composed in the style of Chopin. It's a little bit easier than Chopin's Nocturnes to play. And yeah, it's on my other YouTube channel. Maybe I should post a recording of it on this one too. But if you go over, I've got a whole playlist of originals on my other channel, and they are in a variety of styles. That is one of the more classical ones. So, Jose, you got a Mason and Hamlin AA. That's awesome. I love those pianos. Love them, love them. So yeah, I hope your tuning, voicing, and regulation, that all goes well. So I'm really excited about the work that's going to happen, but that also means I don't get to practice on it for at least like 2 to 3 weeks, probably longer. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. I've got a couple things pre-filmed for you for the channel here that will come out over the next little bit of time, and if we run out of that, then I might do some other things. We'll see. I'll come up with some ideas. Or I'm open to your ideas, too. I know the 5 of you that are here, you watch a lot of this stuff, so that's great. I'm always open to hearing ideas. And if you're watching later, just drop them in the comments. Gosh, that was one announcement. The second announcement was, this is kind of a celebratory thing. We do a lot of talking about classical music and on this channel, and not a lot of talking about the other work that I do. But last week I found out that I had put out an EP of Christmas music. I know some of you knew about that. This past December, and I found out it got played 2.5 million times. So I'm sharing that with all of you as a kind of celebration together. I found that out almost the same week that we were celebrating the 1-year anniversary of this channel starting. So that's super, super exciting. And if you're interested in hearing that, that's also over on my other channel too. In any case, today, I don't have anything pre-planned. I can talk about a couple things in the meantime if we want to, but there were no video submissions for masterclass portion of our segment here this morning. Or this evening, depending on where you are, or this afternoon, I guess. And so I don't have any of those, and I don't have any pre-asked questions that came in. So today is totally open to whatever you want to talk about. So I know definitely Jose, Sir Wolseley, and Bunny, if you've got questions about anything, drop them in the chat. We can always just have a little bit of a fun time this morning. If you don't, I can talk about a couple pianistic things. But let me know. Yeah. Bunny has a question. Bunny says, I love your master classes. Well, thank you, Bunny. And I think that is the coolest. That refers to the streams. So thank you for that too. And let's see, Bunny says you just signed up for the Berklee Online College of Music. Any tips for staying engaged with online classes? Oh boy. Definitely, treat it as if you're in the room. Take notes, have a notebook open, And depending on the speed that material is presented, sometimes you can speed up the material, like you can speed up the videos. I know, at least in my master classes, that's actually an option. It's not super obvious, but in the video player on my coursework and here on YouTube too, you can change the playback speed. And so I would assume Berklee would have an option like that as well. So I only say that because sometimes different presenters' styles can be really slow, and sometimes they're really fast. And you know, if we're sitting through a really slow style presentation, it can be really nice to speed it up to like 1.25 times speed or 1.5 times speed. And then we can always pause it if you miss something and slow it back down and repeat. But I find that helps me stay engaged. And in fact, I do a lot of listening to audiobooks too. I almost never listen to audiobooks at normal speed. I always listen at like 1.25-ish or 1.5, depending on who the reader is. So that would be one thing I would suggest. Second thing, stay engaged as if like you're in the room with the professor who's teaching. So take notes, be thinking about what they're talking about. Bunny, can you share with us what have you been learning so far in your first week? I know I've seen only the stuff on Berklee's YouTube page. I haven't seen any of their paid or behind the paywall stuff. So I'd be super interested to know what the curriculum is. If you can share that with us, that would be awesome. Sir Woolsey asked, have you just said you'll have a new piano, but you won't be able to play on it for a while? Sir Woolsey, I'm getting a bunch of stuff on this piano. I'm putting a bunch of new parts in it, let's say. So I know we even emailed about this, Sir Woolsey. I'm putting new hammers on the piano. I'm having the key bushings redone. I'm having all new strings put on, almost the top 3 octaves of the piano. And there's new, inside in the action, new shanks, flanges, shoulders. I think that covers everything that we're doing. So tomorrow, hammers come off to get sent to the factory that's going to pre-hang the new ones for us. So I'm going to be missing 8 hammers. That would be maybe a funny video. Because I'll probably be playing along, and then there'll just be notes that don't work at all. But also tomorrow, so all those strings are coming off and we're sanding the capo bar. The capo bar is on most pianos. I think all pianos except, I want to say Bechstein. I can't remember. One particular maker of piano uses A-graphs, which are these little brass pieces that the strings go through. Those are the termination point where the speaking length of the string ends on the keyboard side, right? All pianos have them about 2/3 of the way up the instrument. There's one maker that puts them all the way up. I don't think it's Bosendorfer. It's another maker that starts with a B. And most pianos, though, they have a capo bar. And a capo bar is it's a part of the brass plate that the strings go underneath. And I have broken so many strings on this instrument in the 23 years that I've had it. I've probably broken about 30 strings. And it's very likely that the capo bar has a lot of like grooves and rough edges on it, which is also part of the reason why I keep breaking tons of strings. So that's good. The strings are going to come off. That gets sanded down and totally smoothed out. And then next week we'll put new strings on it and kind of get them stretched and sitting and stuff before the new hammers come back in. So that's exciting. Bunny says first class is Berklee keyboard method. Okay, so it's for all kinds of musicians and a fast track to playing piano. So does that mean, Bunny, it's a lot of like chord study, like chord harmony, chord theory, and that kind of stuff? Because I know Berklee is really geared toward people that want to go into, let's say, like the mainstream music business or jazz, one of those two. Later on it will be. Yeah. So, okay, well, that'll be interesting. And you can still apply that to all the other music you're learning, even if it's not in like a pop music style. Classical music still uses a lot of the same chord progressions. They're still a little bit more complex, depending on the type of music we're talking about. But there's plenty that you'll be able to apply back and forth with that, so that sounds cool. Sir Bolsley says, sounds like you're getting a new piano. Is it worth it instead of getting a new piano? Yes. Because let's just say a new piano would cost, almost 30 times the amount of money that it's costing me to do the work on this one. So yes, absolutely. And this isn't going to be like super cheap. It's reasonable, but it's not super cheap. But yeah. I mean, for the kind of instrument that I'd really love to have here, it would be about 30 times. And we'd be talking about like, not even a new Steinway. That would be for like a nice used Steinway. A new Steinway would be more like 40 or 50 times the cost of the work I'm doing. Yeah, pianos, man. For those of you, I know, Sir Wolseley, you have a new, a new old acoustic upright, which is really cool. I think sometimes the older instruments. Actually, Jose, you can answer this too. What year is your Mason Hamlin from? I'd love to know that, because I love knowing about different generations of pianos, and pianos that are sometimes from like the turn of the 20th century, back around 1900. And in the few decades around that, those can be really fantastic instruments. Jose says, any recommendations for learning how to analyze a piece harmonically? An online course maybe. You have theory knowledge, but you can't apply it to a piece. Okay, so Jose, let me see if I can pull something up on my iPad and share it with you. That's a great question. Let's start with just the theory part of that, and then we'll get into maybe why it's important for performing pianists and not necessarily people who only compose or people who only study theory. Let me pull up something that's not going to be too hard, but not too easy either. Okay, let's try this. So I'm going to show Mozart Sonata. I don't know, I'm in kind of a Mozart mood this morning. So Sonata in G, K283. And I'll show it on the screen, and maybe we'll do some little annotation as we go. Sir Wolseley says, you improved your sound quality of your piano by putting a blanket behind it. That's good. I know I feel bad for you, Sir Wolseley, that you have people that are so close and they have complained about the loudness of the playing. Yeah. Jose says, it's a new Mason Hamlin from 2011. Awesome. Jose, does it have the carbon fiber action in it? Or was it just before they started doing that? I love the carbon fiber actions in the new Mason Hamlins. Okay. All right, here we go. Woohoo, you can even see my picture. Okay, so we've got this Mozart Sonata up, and we're going to talk a little bit about some theory. All right, so this piece is in G. That's easy to know. It says it's in G. We look at the key signature. That's great. So when it comes to taking our understanding of theory, we know, let's say, for example, let's identify a couple of the most important chords in G. We've got like our one chord. Let's just take maybe four chords or so. The one chord, let's just G major. I'm not going to write them down yet, but we're just going to list them on the side of the page here. Let's say the 4 chord, C major. The 4 chord, the 5 chord would be D major. If we make that a 5/7, that's got a C natural on top. And then the next most important one, the 6th chord, which would be E minor. Okay, so let's see how often we can put these chords into this music that we're looking at. Oh, Bunny, good to see you. Well, have a good day. And Jose, you said carbon fiber. That's so awesome. I love those. Interesting thing about, we're gonna keep getting sidetracked. Interesting thing about the Mason and Hamlin actions, the WNG actions that are relatively new, about in the last decade-ish or a little bit more. Not many people know this, but they make 2, I think actually 3 different flexes in the hammer shanks that they put on their instruments. And the one that they primarily sell, they only offer the other flex shanks as like a post if you want to change the instrument out or modify it somehow. So their main hammer shank is designed, it's all carbon fiber, but it's designed to have the same amount of flex as a New York Steinway. So they've studied how much the shanks actually bend on strike, on impact, and they designed pieces of carbon fiber that mimic that. The bonus is, because they're carbon fiber and they're not wood, they don't change with temperature or humidity. Yeah, they're fantastic. But they also make shanks that flex a bit more. Actually, they make two shanks that flex even more than that. And some people really, really like those too. And Sir Wolseley says probably from 2000, but more likely from the 80s. Cool, cool. Mine is, I think it's a 1999. Haydar is here. Welcome, Haydar. So, sorry, I'm still in the corner. Okay, so we're taking a look at Mozart, how to apply theory to a piece of music. First things first, let's look at big chunks at a time. So Jose asked this question. Yeah, okay. So for example, if we're looking at this sonata, we're going to look at an entire bar to analyze it. Maybe longer than that in some places, maybe not in some other places. So if we look at this entire first bit, just that much, this is a really nice, lovely place to start because all of the pitches fit into a chord. We've got a G and a B and a D. Everything right there. There aren't any other pitches in the entire bar, left hand, right hand. We know that that makes a one chord. So in the key of G major, this whole bar is considered one because when we analyze, we want to be thinking about how it sounds across the entire length of the bar. So even though, for example, we've got a lowest note, we have an Alberti bass pattern, right? Even though the lowest pitch is changing every eighth note, normally we say the lowest pitch dictates what interval we have, or not interval, what inversion we have. In this case, it doesn't do that. That works when we're analyzing just stacked chords, right? But when we're looking at a line of music, it's actually the tonal quality and what our ear tells us that dictates what inversion. So, for example, this first bar, the inversion doesn't change from first eighth note to second eighth note to third eighth note. It's just in root position because the bass that we get on the downbeat, we do probably add a little bit of pedal, but even if we didn't, it doesn't sound like it's not root position, right? It doesn't sound like it's that. It definitely sounds. Okay, so that is a quick tip about analyzing stuff. The ear, our ear has to dictate, it has to help us understand what the actual root, not the root, what the lowest note is, and therefore if it's in root position or an inversion. Okay, let's move on to the second bar. So we get away from just the basic one chord in root position. Okay, so here, I'm just going to go quickly. This is a D7 chord, which is the 5/7 in the key, but this time it's in an inversion. If we look at this lowest pitch, just like how it worked in the first bar, the first pitch, the downbeat, dictated what our chord inversion was. So this is going to be a 5 chord because it's D is the root, but our lowest pitch is A, so it's in second inversion, which is a 4/3 inversion. Again, that lasts the whole bar. Let me keep going. So 1, 5, 4, 3. Next bar. Ironically, this melody stuff, that works in both well, I guess both chords are D chords, so they're both going to be 5 chords. We just have a 5/7 in inversion, and then it moves in bar 3 to a 5 chord, not with a 7, well, at least not at the beginning of the bar. And this is just a normal old 5 chord in first inversion, so 5/6. Then it changes to, on the third beat, we do get the 7th in. So here's an opportunity where harmony has been dictated by the downbeat, and then it does change when the 7 comes in. The 7 of the chord, which would be C natural here. So here we would say the bar starts as a 5/6 chord, and then when the C is played in the melody, it turns into a 5/7 chord, but it's an inversion. The lowest note of F sharp is still giving us the inversion type, so it's first inversion. So this turns into a 5, 6, 5. Typically, this is kind of a thing about Roman numeral analysis, which is what we're doing. When we do Roman numeral analysis, if the chord root stays the same, if the scale degree the chord is based on, like the 5 chord, if it stays the same, we don't change we don't add another Roman numeral like that. We wouldn't say that. Just where the inversion changes or where a 7th gets added, we add in the inversion type. So like that. And then next bar, we go back to a typical 1 chord. Okay, let's do a quick look at the last bar of this line, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. So we have back to 1, and then stuff like this would be usually a place where people get confused, because it sounds like we have an F sharp that's a part of this chord, and it's on a very important beat, and we lean on it when we perform, right? But the F sharp doesn't become part of our analysis. It is a non-chord tone. So I'll just write, non-chord tone for that one. And we're going to analyze the bar as if it doesn't have F sharp in it. It'll be everything else, which is C major, which in the key of G is our 4 chord. In root position. How do we know that it's a non-chord tone? Partly by ear. Partly because the whole rest of the measure doesn't contain anything else that's related to this F sharp. You could also argue this might be kind of like a suspension, a sharp 4 suspension that resolves to 3. Right? But we can't build a chord we can't build a triad that has C and G and E in it that also has F unless we talk about upper extensions way up there. So then the F sharp is an 11, right? Does everybody know what I mean by upper extensions? Tell me if you don't. It's, Sir Worsley, while I'm taking a break from this, Sir Worsley says, your friend started playing clarinet and you didn't realize everything is transposed. Yes. Concert pitch. Oh, I hate that stuff. Bunny is back. Awesome. Becky is back. Welcome back. We're going to go back into this theory in just a second. I just wanted to catch up on some of those comments. So, how do we know that the F sharp, we're in the last bar of the first line here. How do we know that the F sharp that starts the bar is not a part of the harmony? How do we know that it's not a jazz harmony? How do we know that it's not C11, which would be something like that, or like that? To jazz at Mozart a little bit. We know that it's not an 11 or an upper extension because that note doesn't exist anywhere else. It doesn't exist anywhere in the left hand. It doesn't exist in the harmony. It's not even a part of the melody for very long. It is only an 8th note beat. So that kind of stuff. I might even jump over to a Chopin example because I had a couple people ask me about the beginning of the A minor waltz and the theory analysis that goes with that, because there are a lot of non-chord tones that happen just in the first handful of measures. And just how do we know? Partly ear, partly understanding, well, okay, Mozart would have never used upper extensions. That kind of harmony just didn't really exist in the time of when Mozart was writing. Things were much more simple. This would have been just a 4 chord with you could say an upper neighbor tone to the E, or something like a suspension from sharp 4 down to 3. Same thing happens in the next bar. It's just mimicked. Bunny asks, please explain upper extensions. Thanks for asking, Bunny. Okay, upper extensions. Let's say, so we have a chord, and we have a C chord. We know that harmony, all harmony is built with triads, right? And I think I can show you top down. This will be a little bit better. So all harmony is built in triads, and triads are built using thirds. So our root, we go up a third, we get the next note of the triad. We go up a third from that, we get the next note of the triad. So 3 notes make a triad. This is our basic C major triad. I'm so sorry, Hadar, for using C major. I know how much you love it. Okay, now, when we add a 7th to a chord, and we make a 7 chord, we're just adding another third. So here is C major 7. We have a C major triad and an interval of a major 7th from the bottom to the top. Okay, that's usually where theory stops until you get into contemporary classical music or jazz. When we leave this, we can continue adding thirds on top of B. So now if I play that all with my left hand, and we continue adding a third on top of B, we get a D. And now you see that we are more than an octave away from the root. So C was down here, we passed C, now we have D. All of the notes that are above the octave are called upper extensions. Now, in a major chord, we're going to use all of the diatonic pitches. If we're in a major chord in a major key, so the 1 chord, we would use, diatonic means part of the scale. This would be 9, because it's an interval of a 9th above the root. F, you know what? We're going to use F sharp. That sounds much better. That would be a sharp 11, because this is an 11th above the root. I'm talking about intervals now. Interval of 11th from here all the way up to here. And then we can go up another third to A. That's going to be an interval of a 13th from the bottom. Fun side note, Rachmaninoff could just about reach that distance with one hand. Isn't that crazy? From C, he could definitely reach G. I'm not sure if he could reach the A, but he could reach G. I have quite large hands. I'm not even close. I'm missing a couple notes there. So anyway, so those are upper extensions. Everything above the root of the chord, an octave up, we get upper extensions. And they're called 9 and 11 and 13 based on the intervals above the root that they are. There is a lot of confusion, especially so Bunny, let me, Sir Wolseley, Rachmaninoff did not have a smaller piano. He had a standard size, a normal, modern standard size piano. He just had massive hands. But Mozart definitely had a smaller, the keys were narrower, yes. So no, it's not a two-handed chord. What happens is that, so even though I'm showing you, these are all of the pitches that exist in a chord, or that can exist, right? And then if we go up a third from A, we get right back to C, so we can't add any more. Those can all exist, but when we play them in a piece of music or in context, they might end up being played if I just want this, maybe. So here's a nice jazzy chord, and I've got the 9 and the 11. You can't quite see everything I'm playing there. Let me play it up an octave, or even without that big stretch in the left hand. There we go. So I'm playing the root and the 5th, the 9th, the 3rd, the 11th, and the 7th. We could, Sir Wolseley says, inversions. I could put this in an inversion. All I have to do is change the lowest note. There we go. That's still the same chord, right? So this is using upper extensions. And yeah, it is a two-handed chord. We could also say, let's make it a one-handed chord. Depending on the context, this could be a C with a 9, a sharp 11, and a 13. A C chord. It sounds, out of context, it sounds like a D7. But if we add other context around it, like other harmonic harmony in C major instead of D major, then it sounds like a C with upper extensions. Or totally different, but the right hand didn't change because of context. So I hope, let's see, I hope that answers those questions. So they don't have to be two-handed chords, and most of the time they aren't. especially if usually we talk about this stuff if you're a jazz pianist, and if you're going to play not solo but with a group, like a combo group. A combo would be piano, bass, drums. Maybe you have another solo instrument like trumpet or sax or something like that. A lot of the times the pianists in groups like that, when they're playing a solo, they're going to be playing one note at a time, or just about one hand at a time, because the bassist is going to take care of all the other stuff that happens that the pianist normally, when they're solo, has to do with the left hand, right? So in those cases, jazz pianist is going to know the harmony they're in. They're going to know all of the modes that are related to it. They're going to know scales that go with all of those modes, and how to navigate from one to the next, and what the changes are in the piece. That jazz is a huge amount of memorizing theory and then applying that at the keyboard. So I think it's a lot of memorizing patterns, but then making it musical and making it interesting. I have a huge amount of respect for jazz players because of that. So Sir Worsley says, if we move the position of upper extensions, are they inversions or not? They would be. If we only have, well, okay, let's have a basic talk about what inversion means. Inversion always has to do with the lowest pitch. So if we only have these pitches, let's say, how about this? So I've got an E and a C, which are part of my C chord, right? And then I've got a sharp 11 and a 13. Alone, out of context, out of musical context, this could be a lot of different things. But for our sake, we're just going to say that this is part of a C chord. The bass player, the imaginary bass player, is playing C down there. Okay. Or they could be playing this. Let's have that match the pitch, like they're in the middle of a bass line or something. The lowest note would be our inversion. So yes, this would be a C chord, add 11, 13 in first inversion, because E is the lowest pitch. If we move those upper extensions over to here, it's still first inversion because the lowest pitch didn't change. So that's just like basic triad harmony. If let's, for Hadar's sake, we're going to take another chord. Let's take a C sharp minor chord. Okay, so if we're in C sharp minor, no matter if I have C sharp as the lowest note here, no matter how I move everything else, here, 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 well, that's a 7. I added a 7. Or what if we do this? Or what if we do this? Those are all C sharp minor in root position because the lowest pitch didn't change. Everything else can change, but the lowest pitch. But if we play this, and then we play this, almost all of the right hand stayed the same. The upper notes stayed the same, right? That is a different inversion. Even though none of the rest of the chord changed, the lowest pitch changed, we move from root position, first inversion. So I hope that answered your question, Sir Wolseley. Let's see. So Sir Wolseley says, okay, but you need to note that somehow in letters, right? Are you talking about like in an analysis? In classical theory, we don't use letters at all. So if you're talking about pop music, like this would be C sharp minor, and then this would be C sharp minor over E. That's how we'd notate that. Otherwise, this would be minor 1, if we're in C sharp minor, the key of C sharp minor. A minor 1 chord, this would be a minor 1, 6. So we use numbers in classical theory to tell us what inversion it is. And the number tells us, so, you know, a 1, 6, or a 6 is first inversion of a triad. 6, 4 is second inversion. And then when we get into seventh chords, there are a whole different set of numbers that tell us what the inversions are. And there's a lot of theory behind that, behind why the numbers were chosen. If we want to go into that, I'm happy to talk about it. I just don't want to if people are tired of theory, I don't want to keep hammering on it. But yeah, let me know. I'm happy to keep talking about it. And I mean, Jose was the one who initially had a question about this. Jose, did I cover enough for you about how we can apply harmonic analysis to a piece, and how we look at more than just, you know, vertically, one beat at a time or one note at a time? So Bunny says, yes, seems like you say 11 followed by 3 and it just sounds out of order. Yes, yes. There was an interesting thing that came up actually on Facebook, on one of the groups that I'm a part of, and someone was asking about the use of, for example, 2 instead of 9. So like if this chord, here is a C chord with the second note of the scale, the D in it. It is, let's play it like that. That's nicer. The, yes, Bunny, yeah. So why isn't it called 2 and why is it called 9? And there was a bit of an argument about, well, it's only called 9 if there's a 7 involved, and that's actually not true. I was confused about that, and I actually went into my theory book and I found one paragraph in 900 pages of theory, my theory textbook. There's one paragraph that talks about upper extensions not being used in 7 chords. And no matter what, we use the upper extension number. So that what gets people confused is that when you see a piece of pop music, a lot of people are introduced to these upper extensions in pop music because they don't happen in classical. So this chord, which is technically add 9, right? It's nicknamed the Paul McCartney chord because he writes tons of stuff with the 9 in the major chord. In a lot of pop sheet music, that's written as add 2, not add 9. And so people come to think of it as, well, I'm just going to put the 2 in. It's the second note of the scale. The second note of the scale is D. Well, maybe that is, they started writing that because it's a little easier to understand, but there's no basis for theory. The only time we would actually use 2 is if it's a part of a suspension that resolves. So like this, the first notes of yesterday. That's a 9 resolving to 1. Even though their notes are right next to each other, right? In that case, we might say this is a suspended second scale degree because it's not a part of the harmony. But if it's a part of the harmonic context, then it's 9 and not 2. Yes, it is confusing. And the explanation doesn't exactly make it a whole lot clearer. What makes it most clear is experiencing it and doing some analysis yourself and kind of understanding how it works. But if we're playing a lot of classical music, which most people here are doing that, or yeah. Hey, Max, good to see you. So if we're doing a lot of classical playing, then we're not going to come across those extensions very often. And even in chromatic harmony, romantic chromatic harmony, like Chopin and Liszt's language, and further into the neoclassical artists like Rachmaninoff, chromatic harmony is built using a lot of diminished chords and not necessarily upper extensions. Maybe once in a while, but not very often. I see. So Rosalie says, when you sight read both hands, do you look at both hands and see what they do individually, or if you're able to see everything all at once? Max, well, I'm glad it's your first time here. So, Sir Woolsey, I'm going to come back to that question. Let me just welcome Max for a second. So, Max, today is totally open to questions. Sometimes we do, sometimes it's like an open free-for-all. You can drop any questions that you have about piano, music. The first live stream we did here, I actually had a question about investing in cryptocurrency versus investing in piano lessons, which is a real interesting one. So anyway, the subjects are wide and varied, and you can feel free to ask about anything. And but other times, Max, what we do, great, yeah, drop a question in. And other times, Max, what we do is people submit videos of themselves playing, And we do like a little masterclass. I try to keep it to 20 or 30 minutes. Sometimes I go longer. But you are always welcome to do that, and there should be a link in the description below this video of how to submit a video of you playing. So you can always check that out too. We don't have any of those today. So Max, drop your question in, and I'm going to go back to Sir Wolseley. And then Jose's got a question about the Mozart we were looking at. And then Max's question is about taste in music. Cool, great. I'm going to cover those one at a time. All right, so Sir Wolseley's question, sight reading. Do I look down at the hands? Very rarely. That is definitely a learned skill from doing a lot of sight reading. So we don't just jump from kind of starting sight reading or being a beginner reader into being able to not look at the hands. Depends on how expansive the music is. You might be able to, for example, if we have a sight reading example that is in, go to D major, and it stays in a small position, like it stays in the 5-finger position. Let's see, Sir Wolsey says, poor choice of words, I mean the score. Oh, do you look at both hands in the score? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Combination of things. Let me see if I can show you some music for that too. Oh, we'll jump back to the Mozart since I've got it pulled up here. I just need to get it connected again. Come on, here we go, okay. Okay, so we were talking about theory here, but let's talk about sight reading this. It's just, oh, I accidentally cleared it, oh well. Let's put it back, just in case we need to talk about it again. Okay, so now we've got no notes on here. And let's say I need to sight read, we're sight reading this piece, and it's the first time. I am gonna look at everything that composes, I'm gonna look at everything that composes the entire first bar, and I'm going to try to do a little bit of analysis of that, and I'm gonna see what both hands have to do in the rhythms that they play. So the better we get, the more we can see at one time. So for example, I see the entire triad that the left hand builds. I see the motion in the right hand and the rhythm. I see that it's a pickup on beat 3 only. All of that I see before I even start playing. And then, this is the really tricky part. As we play, let's do that. As we play, we continue to look forward when we're playing something different. So when I'm playing the first bar, I'm going to be looking at this bar. So as soon as I play the pickup and the downbeat, I'm looking at the next bar. And now I'm looking at bar 3. Now I'm looking at bar 4. Now I'm looking at bar 5. And now the next line. And now the next bar. No, this looks like a hard measure, but I see it's just a scale. It's a scale, 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 and then we've got a chord, G major chord. That is a D7 chord, but it doesn't have the D in it. And then back to the root. Okay. So scale, chord, chord, chord. Yes, and I've not practiced this. I really am pretty much reading it. I'm familiar with the music, yes, but it's not something I had looked at all before we started today. So, yes, both hands, absolutely. Now, when we're not going to start by reading something that's this complicated, right? We're going to start off with something that's much more simple. And other people have asked for, so Wolsey says that's hard. Well, we build one step at a time, right? Let me pull up something else here, just quickly. Okay, so I've got another example up. Okay, this is from a book of sight reading examples, and it's from the beginning of book 1, which means the examples are easier, right? Okay, so now, yes, we're still going to read both hands. We're going to read the time signature, we're going to read the notes, we're going to read the rhythms, but there's nowhere near as much going on. So we're looking at like example number 3 here. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. but I'm still trying to do the same thing. And without making this entire, without going into a huge amount of detail about sight reading, when we're practicing sight reading, we always pre-look at a whole bunch of stuff. So we pre-look at the key, of course. We pre-look at the time signature. We also pre-look at measures of music at a time, like a phrase at a time. In this case, we can see throughout this entire exercise, number 3, we don't leave the 5-finger position. And we're going to look at that before we play a note. So we're going to see this entire thing, we never leave that 5-finger position. We don't have to transition, we don't have to cross any fingers, and we can remember that. Then we take a look and we say, okay, where are, let's say, something like steps versus skips? Can we make a note? Mental, you can even draw it first. Let's draw in, okay, where do we have skips? Only skips. Everything else that doesn't get an arrow is going to be stepwise. Okay, to the next bar. There it is. Things like that. So we might draw that in first, but eventually we want to get to the point where we see that, and then we can read it with that knowledge. So we take these little incremental things. Of course, the other thing we can see in this piece is the right hand and the left hand are doing exactly the same thing. That helps as well. But in general, we try to identify as much as we possibly can to help us read it before we start. That's not just in preparing, let's say, for a sight reading test as a part of an exam, which all of the typical diploma exams and everything else, they all have a sight reading portion. We wouldn't just do this preparing for something like that. We would also try to do this when we sight read and we're learning a new piece of music. Identify all kinds of things that we can relate to. What that's going to be is going to depend on your level, how much music you've looked at, the theory that you understand. And that is one of the reasons why I know when we were talking about the other Mozart example for Jose, and when we went into depth about that, we were doing a lot of Roman numeral analysis, but that analysis comes right back into play when we start to read it. Because if we're on a very advanced level, we know what, let's say, in the key of G, the 1 chord, the 5 chord, the 4 chord, the 1 chord, the 6 chord, and the 3 chord, and the 4 chord, and the 1 chord. So all of that, we not only conceptually know it, but it's in our fingers too. The first and most basic way people start to learn that is by playing cadence patterns 1, 4, 1, 5, 7, 1. A lot of students just go through that and they memorize it. We play a scale, and then play the cadence pattern. What's even more important than that is that you understand the relationship of everything that you just played. Because going through the motions is great, and that's part of it. We want to feel what the chords feel like and the inversions and all that. But understanding this is 1, this is 4, and the root is C, it's not G. And this is 5, 7. That goes a really, really long way. Bunny, I'll answer that real quick. Do you know a practice book of cadences? I don't know of a book of cadences. No. But what I would suggest doing is what I just showed you, 1, 4, 1, 5, 7, 1, and then do that in your inversions as well. So we did starting with root position on the 1 chord, and then the other chords get inversions to make it closest position possible. If we start the 1 chord on the first inversion instead, now the whole cadence pattern is different. And if we start it on the second inversion instead, the whole cadence pattern is different again. Let's see. There it is. Yeah? So it would be great practice to go through all of that. And every time you play a scale, finish with the cadence pattern, but don't just do first inversion, which is usually the only thing that the tests require of a student. Go through first inversion, root position, 1 chord, first inversion, 1 chord, second inversion, 1 chord, and you will end up going through many of the iterations of the other chords in the cadence pattern as well. And then if we really want to get more advanced, I might write out some examples for a student to practice, where I'll write my own 6 or 8 measure long cadence pattern for them to learn. and then we'll learn that in a handful of keys. But that usually depends on the repertoire being learned and if they're studying composition theory and other things like that too. Let me jump back to some other questions here. So yes, Sir Wolseley, feel free to chime back in if you've got more questions about sight reading, and we'll come back to that. Jose's question was about the gesture for finger passage, measure 35 through 37 in the Mozart Sonata that we had up before. Okay. (31, 32, 33, 34, 35). Okay, let me put it up on the screen. So we're looking at, this is measure 35 here. And let's see, you asked 35, 36, and 37. So starting here and going to here. And you're asking about a gestures for the 4 fingers, probably right hand. Let's see. That's treble clef. Here we go. I'm just trying to figure out first what the fingering would be. Yeah, I like that. That would be an interesting bit. So going back to your question, Jose, is your question about like body gesture, arm gesture, or is it a musical gesture? Can you clarify that a little bit? While you type that in, let me write in a little bit of the fingering. 5, 5, 4. 2 and 4. 1. That repeats. Hand and Faber gestures, Jose says. Okay, good question, Jose. You're making me talk about this stuff before I have a chance to put a video together. I love it. So, yeah. So in general, I wouldn't actually give a student these gestures to think about right away when we're learning the notes. But if let's say, so we're talking about the first grouping here. I'll put it in blue. So the first grouping there is going to be an over gesture as we go down. It's almost exactly matches gesture, I think, 2 in the Hand and Faber book. So it would be going down with an upper wrist circle, right? And then we're going to link that under, we're going to play 2 and drop underneath. So over, and we kind of turn around, which is a combination of the third gesture in the book. And then we have a lower wrist circle playing the second beat of this. So the second beat. So here we have an upper wrist circle. Here we have a bit of a lower wrist circle. And the transition point, we don't just change direction. I actually should just draw it more like this. We actually transition from the upper circle right into the lower one. So we come down, the thumb drops. The thumb drops into that A, and then we all continue to drop into the second finger. So up, and I'll put the bigger screen back on. So up and around, and drop. We drop into thumb, drop into the second finger more, and continue down around the bottom. And then this would pretty much repeat for each bar. Each bar that has this downward motion, upper circle, then lower, upper. 36 would be upper, lower, upper. And then again we have a lower circle, which is prohibited a little bit by a fingering change that we would have to make in measure 37. But to play it, let me see, at a little bit of tempo here. Oh, yeah. So there you go. And going back to Sir Wolsey's comment, you can tell I'm sight reading. But, so where it's more complicated, I'm just digesting as much as I can ahead of time. And sight reading this, I'm not incorporating the gesture as much as I would as if I were actually, I would have this practiced. So, good question, Jose. Do you agree, Jose? Let me ask you that. Do you agree? And let's see, Max's question, how to develop good taste in music? Or is it possible to teach good taste? 2, 3, 4, 1. Oh, let me go back to Jose's comment right now, Max, and then we'll come back to your question. So that is interesting that you find 2, 3, 4, 1 awkward. The only reason I picked that is because having second finger crossover, which I think is the other option, would be 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, right? 2, 1, 2, 1. Is that movement of 2, 1, 2, 1, when we're really playing it at a quick pace, quick tempo, I'd feel like that might cause some stumbling. So if I really want to play that fast, at least, I wouldn't do 2, 1, 2, 1. What happens is the second finger pushes us toward thumb at the end of this little figure, which is the opposite direction as what we need to go to play 5 up the next bit. Whereas if we condense the hand and play 2, 3, 4, when we transition from 4 to 1, the hand is immediately kind of launched back toward the 5th finger. So those are my reasons for that one. Jose, do you move slightly out to give 3 some room? No. I make sure that I'm playing second finger on the edge of the G sharp, the front edge. There's just a lot of finger curve, so that my third finger is definitely not in between the black keys. Yeah. So Jose, let me move back over to Max's question. And let's see, Sir Wolsey said define good taste. So Max's question was, is it possible to teach good taste? Jose Taubman, no finger curling? Oh gosh. That seems like that would make that passage quite difficult. Extra difficult, because even second finger, we have to have the finger curved in order to not play B flat or A sharp. So yeah, we could probably continue talking about that, but let's see. Is it possible to teach good taste? How to develop good taste? I have a couple of thoughts for you, Max. The first thing is just do a whole lot of listening to as many great performers as you can, and know who the great performers are, right, and listen to them. If you're doing a lot of learning of music, it is really possible to find a lot of not great performances on, my arrangements. Are you talking about playing mine, or are you talking about writing arrangements, Max? Well, thank you, Max. I appreciate that. So in my case, I'm coming from, it's a similar as what I was just about to tell you. But if we're talking about composing with good taste, part of that is, again, I've spent a ton of time listening to a lot of music and listening to a lot of great pianists and playing a lot of the great piano works and playing a lot of orchestral reductions as well. So I used to, when I was working on my degrees, I loved playing Liszt transcriptions. Loved it. Any chance I got, I would play Liszt or a Liszt transcription. So the choices that I make as a composer are highly influenced by what my ear and my hands have become accustomed to. So that's the first thing I can say. And then when I started arranging stuff at the beginning of that whole journey, it was all improv, and it was nowhere near as complex as it is today, for the most part, or as thought out compositionally. It was a lot of just, let's go through things and play some arpeggios and other things, and that broadened quickly into how can I make it more complex and take time and think about voice leading and think about chord voicing and inversions and think about how to make the piano sound like other instruments, how to make the piano sound like an orchestra, because a lot of what I do is try to make the piano sound like it's the orchestra playing. A lot of what I arrange for solo piano is originally orchestral work. And I try to do it in a way that is only as hard as it needs to be. Sometimes that is very technically difficult, and sometimes it's really not. So all of that experience has led me to make the decisions I make, combined with, let's say, if I know I want to write something in the style of Liszt, an arrangement in the style of Liszt, I go and I pull Liszt's music out, and I pull out what he was arranging from. So if it's Tristan and Isolde, if it's a Liszt arrangement from a Wagner opera, I'll look at both. I'll look at the original orchestral score, and I'll look at what Liszt did with it, and how things transformed, and the tools that Liszt used, and then I'll kind of categorize things and say, well, okay, I can use this tool and this tool and this tool. It's not really copying. It's just he discovered so many ways to make things incredibly pianistic. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. And there's not like there's a lot of other people doing what I'm doing in that vein online. There might be one, like Jared Radnich arranges at a very, very virtuosic level. A lot of the other arrangements that are out there, they may get a lot of attention, but they are much more intermediate level. They don't include all of that crazier technical stuff. So that's kind of where things are informed. And then if I'm looking to arrange something in a Russian style or with a Russian sound, I'll pick out a couple pieces of Rachmaninoff, let's say, and I will study harmonic changes. I'll study how he has the hands move and how he navigates certain types of passage work, what harmonies he avoids, what harmonies he indulges in, things like that. And I'll just start making a list of things. And then I'll take those tools and I'll apply them to what I'm working on. So that is, I'm always studying the great composers. And sometimes there's enough inspiration and enough in my head already from all of I've been now arranging for 10 years. So sometimes there's enough in there that I know the language that I want to speak in, if that makes sense. Like Liszt's language is different from Rachmaninoff's language. So I know and I can choose where I want things to go. But if I hit a roadblock or if things aren't comfortable enough, I just go back and I study one of the greats, which is a lot of fun. And it also means going back to the first thing I said. It means listening to recordings of great artists, playing the great composers, reading the score, doing harmonic analysis, kind of how we started the whole show today with some Roman numeral analysis. I won't do it like I might for theory class. It's not a turned-in assignment, so I might skip over a bunch of bars. if I can see kind of the shape of things and how they're going. Jose, thank you for the super. I'm going to come back to that in a second, Jose. So Max, I hope that answers your question. And it's Max, you said, means you're working on a ton of stuff. Yes, I am. And I'm always getting frustrated, if I'm just honest with everybody who's here. I'm always getting frustrated by the lack of time I have to practice because I'm teaching and I'm making videos for this channel, teaching in-person private students, making videos for this channel and doing our live streams. And then a huge amount of the other work I do is writing and composing. And I'm always wishing that I had more time to practice. Because a lot of times I'll write something. I know many of you heard my arrangement of Nessun Dorma that came out last week. And granted, I got the whole thing done in a week, but it was like a week focused on writing it and then practicing it, learning how to play it, and then recording it. And that took away all the time. Like Sir Wolseley, I know, has been asking for a performance of Chopin's First Ballade. I'm still working on it, Sir Wolseley, but I haven't had a chance to practice it in now, I think, 2 weeks. I also have a performance. It's a very, very tiny thing coming up at the end of the month. But the minutes now that I do have to practice, I'm focusing on what I have to play there. And so things have just kind of, there's a little bit of frustration from me. I always wish I had more time to practice. There's just not enough time in the day. Thanks for a cool question, Max. I had fun answering that one for you. Let me go back to let me get back to what let me see what Sir Wolseley just said, and then we're going to go back to Jose maybe. Sir Wolseley says, you have a lot of experience in the matter. Have you ever seen? I have not seen. Is it Lauren? I have not seen Shorts. No. I'll have to look that up. Sir Wolseley, can you put that in a comment in the video, because I'll have a lot easier time finding his name if you drop it in a comment than going back through the chat. Sometimes the chat disappears for like a day or two. But I would love to check him out. Yeah, that would be cool. Jose, we're going to have an more of a chat about Taubman and yes, and the natural finger position. No curling and no flattening out. I'm just trying to think about how I would apply that to the measures that we have in question. Hey, we have Christian here. Christian, I got your name wrong last time too. Did I say it right today? Hey there. So thinking about this Mozart passage. He says close enough. Thanks, I appreciate your understanding. Anybody, if you look at my last name, my name has been put through the ringer. So, Sir Jose, if you can look closely, would Taubman say that this much curve in the third finger, what I'm currently playing, I don't know if you can see that, is that much curve acceptable, or is that too much? Because that is a natural hand position for me. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty close, I guess. And when I guess the one thing I'm doing, Jose, that I would love your input on is when I put 3 on the A natural, I'm playing kind of on the tip of the finger, but it's not, it's still, let's say, this hand position, which is I don't feel like I'm retracting the fingers at all. It doesn't feel like there's tension. It's not quite, if I shake it out, it's not quite as relaxed as this position. It's more like that. But there's very little difference between the two that I feel in the body. Yeah, I would love to know what you think about that. And if you feel like that matches. So Max is saying, can you use 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3? That's what I am. So Max, yeah, that's what I'm using. 2, 3, 4, 1. It's the long 2 elongated to the G sharp. Jose, what would you use on G sharp then? I'm trying to think of another finger combination. A Bachwards fellow is here. Hey, hey. We're talking about Taubman and finger choices. I don't know what other finger I would use, Jose. Because we can't have anything really but the thumb on the A that is at the bottom here. If we go to the third finger on G sharp, there'll be less extension of that finger toward the black note, but then there's more curve of 4 and 5. Yeah. Bachwards says preference to rotation. And I would definitely play this with a lot of rotation. We didn't talk about that with the gesture because hand and Faber gestures are focused on, well, there are rotational gestures too. But, as Jose says, definitely 2, but keep it in its natural curvature. So, you know, everything is a balance. And that's the interesting thing about one choosing fingering and technique choices too, is that, so if what you're suggesting here is, if we keep 2 more curved, the hand has to move in toward the black keys. And Richard, hey, I'm going to come back to your comment in just a second, Richard. Thanks for being here. So if the hand has to move in toward 2, then if we have to move back out to the white keys, we've just added in and out motion that is going to take time to execute. And even there might even be a little bit of wrist tightening involved in the inner walking motion. And if we have to do that, I am not sure that I would be able to execute this back and forth fast enough to really play the passage. That isn't a technique that I would choose to do or choose to use because there's other things going on. So I will end up compromising the extension on 2 and playing in a more stable or a position in and out of the keys that is has less movement simply because of the speed. That just works really, really nicely for my hand. But everything's always a balance. And you know, everybody's technique is a little bit different. Natural curvature of 2 puts third finger in. Oh yeah, in between. Yes. So that's my point, is that if we're not going to play with the third finger in between the keys, we have to walk into 2, and then on the next 16th, we have to pull out back toward the front of the keys. And that on 2/16 in out on 2/16 that's a lot of in and out movement. And if we stay moved in for second finger to play with more curve, but then have to throw second finger over A sharp or B flat, that's really risky to play that white key as if it's between the, in the narrow part of the key next to the B flat. So almost regardless, if we don't extend 2 at all, we're stuck with 2 other possible negative outcomes. One is using 3 in the middle of the black keys, which is not great. That's not a good choice. And the other is using 2 on the B that comes after, but 2 then has to fall over the top of B. And at speed, you're going to be, it's highly likely you're going to play that. Because at speed, 2 isn't going to want to drop over and kind of around B flat. Sir Woolsey says, do we have to be so focused on what technique we use? When at a certain point, yes, I would say yes. And that's one thing that a teacher is going to help you with, because when you're studying, you don't always, well, you don't know all the intricacies and all of the different directions you could go. And a good teacher is going to see everybody's hand works a little bit differently. And this is also part of choosing making finger choices, right? Everybody's hand works differently. If we're not studying an etude, and this isn't to work on a specific technique or better a certain kind of technique, we're going to make different fingering choices. Seth, hey Seth. Let me come back, Seth, to you in just a second. I want to hop over to Richard's question because he chimed in here a handful of minutes ago. And then I think, yeah, we're just about going to wrap up today. But let's see. Richard said, okay, so you're asking if I work out of a studio or if it's a room in my home. It is a room at home. Yes, I mean, it is dedicated to doing this and filming and doing all this stuff for the channel. But it's just at home. What you can't see, I am looking, when I look at the camera, I'm also looking straight into the kitchen. So yeah, it's just a room in the house, and I'm a one-man band. I just do all of it myself. That might be something I talk about in the coming weeks. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what there's time for in the videos and the weeks that are coming up. And let me just see. Let's see. Bachward's fellow said. Yes. So Bachward's fellow is saying there are some passages that can't be played with more curved fingers. There are passages that can't be played with more extended. I agree with that, and that's I think goes back to my point about balance in choices. So how can we, in the passage that we're talking about, this Mozart passage, right? How can we keep things in as natural a position? I'm a big fan of that, and that part of Taubman. We want the most natural position. We don't want to curl in, and we don't want to be playing on really almost on the tips of the fingers at all. That's not natural. The hand doesn't fall in that position. But how much from whatever natural shape is, how much can we relax in? That's not, I don't feel like that caused any tension, that position versus that position. That's just it's different amount. It's not even different amounts of relaxation. Sometimes when I shake things out, it's one way. Sometimes it's another way. So we have to be really aware in the body of what that feels like, because if we do feel like we are gripping or grasping, that's bad. And if we do feel like we're extending, that's, I think, even worse. And Sir Wolsey says, try playing Brahms with curve. Brahms is super spread. Lots of chords. Even Beethoven is very, very spread. So, yeah. And I think I agree with what Bachward's fellow just said. If you can figure out the least compromise. And there's always something. There's always something that gets compromised. It's either a finger choice. We're either going to play something with a finger that's less ideal. We're going to have the hand in a position that's less ideal. Yeah. Gosh. I wonder what Mozart would have played it with. because, like we mentioned earlier today, his keys were narrower as well. So it would have been very unlikely probably to get between the black keys at all for Mozart. So, but he also had a keyboard that had far less key weight, right? So it took extraordinary little effort to depress the keys. So he could probably just fly through this passage like nobody's business. Yeah, interesting thoughts. And let's see, did I miss anything? Yeah, Bachroth's Fellow, that's a good idea. Check out if you can find videos of this passage in particular of somebody's hands playing it. Oh, Christian, I would question what you just said a bit about being forced to be in between the black keys a lot. I would wonder. There's definitely that would have to be approached on like a measure by measure basis. Because just having a short pinky or having a little bit less span in the hand, we still want that to affect the position in between the keys as the least amount possible. There are times when we can't avoid it, of course, but gosh, the only reason we're even really having a conversation about this spot in particular is because of, I think, the speed that's involved. If we had more time to play the gesture and to play the notes, it would be a lot easier to put the hand in its ideal shape and position for every single note. But it's almost like at speed, you almost have to like shake it out of your hand, right? Yeah. And Christian, Arabesque 1, is that Debussy's that you're talking about? I don't know if I have that on my... I don't have the Arabesque on my... let me grab it real quick so I can help you with that. And then we're going to call it a day, I think. So give me just a second. Okay, so let's see what we're dealing with. Well, simply the nature of this piece dictates that we have to spend a lot of time between the black keys, regardless of hand size. I mean, the opening bars, I'm definitely up and into the keyboard. We have to be, because of the best fingering choices. Christian, do you have any bars that are particularly troublesome for you? For a lot of people, it's the ones that are coming up. And then, okay, piano. Is it piano Depois? Mr. Piano, Mrs. Piano, I can't see your picture. Natalia, awesome. Thanks for joining us. Let's see, you're going to play Chopin's Waltz in A minor tomorrow. Tips about the arpeggios. Piano, okay, piano after 30. Thanks. Thanks for clarifying that. Great. So yeah, let me jump back over to Chopin. And Christian, yeah, if you've got measure 19 in the Arabesque, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Did I count that wrong? I don't have measure numbers in my score. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 17, 18, 19. Good. So Natalia, let me answer Christian's question, and then we're going to come back and talk just a smidge about the Chopin. So are we talking about the left hand, Christian? Yes, left hand, okay. I love this piece. Okay, so I would highly suggest, in some places the third finger gets stuck between the black keys. So like from the first bar of this section, we have an F double sharp that starts us off. 5 should definitely be pulled out. Oh, there was, Sir Wolseley said there was a question from Seth. You're right, there was. I totally forgot about that. I need to go back and answer that. I hope Seth is still here. Okay, so real quick, Christian. Okay, let's see if you can see this. When we begin this and we have F double sharp, 5 should definitely be out and away from the black keys. It's so much easier to play this, especially with a smaller hand span. Down here, it's so much easier to play, and then we rotate the hand. I'm in a bad position to show you a great execution of this. But there's movement, lateral movement of the arm back and forth that helps us align thumb up to the upper notes, right? So we always start with 5 out here, and then we can move in toward thumb, back out toward 5. Now, when 5 has to play a black key, that's actually a lot easier, I think. And then you also mentioned about third finger getting stuck in between the black keys. So maybe here's our first time. We need to let the hand relax and come out of the keys. So third finger is, man, I'm in such an awkward position to talk into the mic and show you this. Third finger we can kind of stay stretched a little bit. Third arpeggio. Let's see. It's probably this one. Yeah. So we'll stick with this A arpeggio. 3, I'm playing out toward the front of the black key first, front of the white keys first, and then the hand walks in and walks back out. And with each one of these, I'm still letting the fingers relax. I'm not staying super stretched. Right? I hope that makes sense. So we do want to avoid, yeah, great, Christian. We do want to avoid having the hand stuck in here. In fact, the smaller our hand span is, the less time we want to spend up and into the keys because it's so much harder. So we have to play in and out more often. But from this angle, I think you can also see, just look at how much my left arm moves on each of these. You see there's so much arm movement back and forth. That's all to keep the fingers as aligned as possible with the arm. Yes, have a really loose left arm. That's right. Great. So, Natalia, I'm sorry. I really need to go back and answer Seth's question. He didn't say that he was still here, but let me do that, and then we're going to hit Natalia's question about the Chopin. And then we're going to call it a day for today. Oh, and then Scott had a comment. Do we have any of Mozart's actual fingerings? I don't actually know that question. I don't know an answer to that. Does anybody? I can't find. Oh, there it is. Seth's question. How are you keeping track of the pulse of the piece when you play? That's a great question, one that I think we can all benefit from. So pulse is partly comes from doing a lot of practice, right? But always having a sense of, oh gosh, something that I like to talk about is heartbeat instead of metronome, let's say, right? Heartbeat is something that it varies a lot, right? And that's a natural pulse. It's a natural pulse. And so we know that depending on our emotional state, and music goes through a lot of different emotional states, depending on the emotional state, heartbeat varies. And we can speed up and we can slow down, but there's always this underlying pulse, right? It's always present, and it doesn't change instantly at one time. That gets into a little bit of talk about how to make great rubato, right? But if we think about how consistent the heartbeat is, especially if we're just in a calm and consistent emotional state, right? It's always there, and it's always present, and it keeps going. There are still subtle shifts. It's not metronomic. We are not robots. So that's one thing that I would suggest thinking about, feeling, and being in tune with. Second thing is, so Bachwart's fellow says, set the metronome to count only the first beat of each measure. That is, I would say that's a few steps down the road. That's a great tool to use, but we have to have a really amazing sense of beat subdivision before that's going to be super successful. So that is actually one of the last places I go, is either set a metronome or let's pretend we're playing over the course of a very long beat, and we're feeling all the subdivisions. Subdivisions are things like your eighth notes, things like your 16th notes. Even if we don't have those in a passage, we consistently feel all of those miniature pulses. Feeling all of them in a natural way doesn't lead us to play metronomically. In fact, it can lead us to be the most expressive in the most natural way, because when we change tempo or change rubato in a way that is so, it's almost like it's precisely measured, even though we're making the decisions based on emotional intention, when we feel all the mini pulses that are everywhere, that is when we can create really subtle and minute changes in tempo, rubato, in highlighting something in a phrase. And you almost can't analyze what the difference is, but it's there. It could be just a tiny fraction of a difference, a fraction of a percent of a beat. But because we're feeling all these minute little pulses throughout, it makes a massive difference in the end product, right? So, gosh, working on pieces that are Bach or Mozart or Haydn, those are great for developing that sense of pulse, because the music itself gives us a lot of those quick denominations of notes. We get lots of eighth notes and lots of 16th notes to play. Then when we have to play something lyrical, which is going to be next up, and so I'm going to bridge these two things together. I'm going to pull up that Chopin waltz, and we're going to start by talking about subdivision of pulse. And then we're going to go into Natalia's question about it. So, okay. So here, in this piece, we've talked about this on some live streams before. Right? We do actually have quite a number of eighth notes. But we could play, or we could be counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 all of the ands of the beats, even when we don't have eighth notes to play. If we're counting all of those subdivisions, the shape of our phrase is going to be very influenced by that, right? 1 and 2 and 3. Notice how much I'm speeding up and pulling back, and speeding up and pulling back to add emotion and musicality, right? But I'm doing that by counting all of the small pulses. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1 and 2. Maybe that was a little bit too much. But I'm always feeling those subdivisions of pulse. There's always a part of me in my mind that's feeling that. Even if I go, and now we go forward a few steps and we do what Bachward's fellow suggested, feeling the big beats. 1, 1, 1, 1. Well, all of my intricacies are being informed by the little pulses still, feeling those little pulses. And, we could put on, I'm not going to do that right now, we could put on a metronome and we could play precisely I feel like we could put a metronome to this. Except for that last note. But sometimes I hesitate to use a metronome because it can take away the musicality. So sometimes I'll have students put a metronome on and say, let's feel a few bars, feel a few measures in our mind, hear it in our mind, in our ear, imagine it, at this speed. Then we turn the metronome off. Because sometimes if the clicking is persistent, it can be great if we really need to hone in and dial that in. But sometimes if we just use it as a reminder, sometimes if we just, I'm just reading some of the comments. Sometimes if we just use the metronome beat as a reminder, that can be enough for us to lock into that pulse and feel things the way it needs to be. And then when we finish a pass through, or we finish a phrase or a statement, sometimes we can test ourselves, put the metronome back on after we're done playing, see how far did we stray from the beats per minute that we intended. Sometimes, Bachward's fellow's agreeing with me, thanks. Sometimes if we stray a lot, well, then we're going to need to do some practice with the metronome on more consistently. If we don't stray very much, then the metronome becomes a reminder, a tool that reminds us of what we're supposed to do, instead of the robotic, perpetual click of death. Metronomes are good and bad. Okay, so let's jump over to Natalia's question. I see Sir Wolseley's already, you're being a great moderator. Thanks, Sir Wolseley. Let's see, so the conversation so far, Sir Wolseley's saying it's much easier to play them non-legato, but Natalia's teacher said that jumping was becoming an addiction and said to practice legato with flexible thumb. Well, I've got to say, both Sir Wolseley and your teacher are correct. There isn't one great, simple solution to playing the arpeggios that are partway through this piece, or halfway through the piece, right? Oh, man, I can do that better. There we go. Okay. So this... When we play it at performance tempo, there is no way to play. I guess we wouldn't connect that top one. Oh yeah, we would. So when we have to finger legato that, and we have to connect all of it with this flexible thumb idea, that requires a lot of arm movement and wrist movement, because we have to get things lined up and our fingers only reach so far. Right? When we add more movement, we inherently slow down the possibility, how fast we can play something. When we reduce movement and become more efficient, we allow more speed. So the best way to practice this arpeggio in this piece and all arpeggios is doing both things that we actually just talked about in the chat. So playing them with finger legato. I have all of my students practice arpeggios this way. 2 ways. With finger legato and no pedal, right? And also with jumps. Start with no pedal, and then we add the pedal to hear the continuity. And what we will really want to hear is that the finger we leave off on, in this case it's 3, and then the finger we land on, those do not get accented. So with the pedal down, that should sound exactly the same as all finger legato. When we can articulate both of those techniques the same way, then we can speed up the jumping technique. Where does that actually go to? There is no way that we're ever going to be able to play a quick quintuple there. Come on, Charles. Unless we do some finger jumps there. So let's see, Natalia says, you can hear the division. Yes. So that we work on by playing with finger legato. And then when we practice jumps, instead of practicing them very quickly, like this, if we're having accents that happen, just slow it down. Make sure that we don't have any accents in there. So take a slow enough tempo that all goes away, right? This is still, I mean, I can't promise that this is going to help tomorrow, but I can't promise it's going to make it perfect tomorrow. Let me put it that way. It is definitely going to help today, though, and it will help how tomorrow comes across. Most definitely. So spend some time, go slowly, maybe all now start to feel a more of a pulse, so we feel a different division of speed, right? So we do have a triplet, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. So then it's a little bit more in context. After jump, accent the second. Yeah, you can try what Bachward's Fellow just suggested. So after the jump, accent the second note after the thumb. That can sometimes shift our attention away from falling into the thumb. And then going beyond that. So this is what he's intending. We would accent G sharp there, or if we keep going, G sharp above. Yeah? Whew. There was one other question that came in. Oh, by the way, Natalia, good luck tomorrow. It'll be great. You're going to do great. And yeah. Don't be afraid of this spot. You've been working on it. You've been practicing it. So it's going to be wonderful. And just add a little bit of slow practice in, and people are going to love it. Thanks, Bunny. Thanks for joining. So I thought I saw one more question come in, and I'm going to answer that really quickly. Oh, it's Christian. What would be a good starting piece from Mozart? If you're about Henley level 6? Gosh, it could be almost any Mozart sonata at Henley level 6. Yeah, at that level, there isn't really anything that's, there might be some that are a little more of a challenge than others, but definitely nothing that's not doable. Yeah. So, gosh, some of the usual ones are what we just, talked about. And the Mozart C major. That one. Yeah, that would be great. So those are 2 great choices. But gosh, pick out one that you want to play. Go and listen to some and pick one that you find enjoyable and that resonates with you. I would do that. Avoid maybe things that have excessive double thirds or thirds, trills and thirds or something like that. Yeah, we might want to avoid those kinds of things. But that's not all over Mozart. It's only in really, I think, the most difficult of the most difficult sonatas. Great. Well, today's been a really awesome session. Oh, thanks everybody for joining in today. And so there are a handful of new people here. Just a reminder for everybody, if you've not been here before, thanks Jose. If you've not been here before, I do take video submissions of your playing and we review them. So if you're open to it being shown live on YouTube, and then we have kind of a bit of a masterclass that's public, but it's mainly between you, the submitter of the video, the player, the performer, and myself. Those are always open to do, and there's a link in the description, or there's some information in the description about how to do that. Oh, thank you, Natalia. We can, so that's always a possibility. Sir Worsley has done it many times, and I appreciate it. I seem to think Jose sent one thing in. I cannot remember, Jose, if you did or not. But we're always welcome to submit some stuff, and it's always great to hear from you. I love hearing people. I love hearing people who are watching, and I love hearing what you're playing and what you're working on. That's always a lot of fun. And even sometimes I find out things that I find out music that I didn't know existed. Things that you have found, and I always enjoy that too. So anyway, if you haven't already, please give the video a thumbs up. Click that like button. It really helps. I saved saying that all the way until the end. And 2 weeks from today, we'll do another session. And in the meantime, hope you have a great rest of your week. Have a good weekend. And I'll actually see you next time because my piano will be under construction. We'll be in a totally different place. So that'll be a surprise for everybody. All right. Keep practicing smarter, not harder. And I'll see you next time. All right, everybody. Have a good week.